Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Carmen. Good morning,
Good
Max.
morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to today's conversation. Thank you for joining us on humans and technology. So I'm Carmen. I've known you for some years now, and I know your background has been extensive in the area of human resources. And for the last 20 years or more, you've been in that field, and you're also founded your own company, My HR Specialist, and are the owner and key strategic member behind that. So welcome and thank you for joining us. Max, I think, thank you, Carmen. Max, I mean, we go back a good 10 years back, I think, since we met in some of the training and development courses we were participating in. And you've been in technology for the lion's share of your life. I was learning from you. I mean, as a child or as a kid, you were already working with technology, and then you went on to get your bachelor's in computer science and have worked in technology for the last 20 or 30 years, I believe, if I remember correctly. And currently you're updating or just getting more up to date with regards to the issues being created by technology inside of cybersecurity, ransomware, and basically everything, the hygiene behind being able to take manage the risks being created by technology. Humans and technology is one of my favorite topics. I've been in growth and development for a good 15 years, so I've always been after like looking into human potential for my own self as well as for others around me. And as we look at technology, or as I look at technology, and when I started out in the professional world, I remember using a typewriter. Our most recent generations probably, typewriter is something you see in the museum, but for some of us that have been around for a minute, typewriters were a thing. And there was no hacking a typewriter. There was no ransomware or attack into a typewriter. You typed on a piece of paper and somebody could go through your trash bin and be able to, collect papers and information that they could find. Today, we're at a point where most everything is digital. We're doing less and less paper. And from an insurance standpoint, we now have the advent of a cyber liability insurance policy. And that's something that 10 years ago, 15 years ago was not a thing. So there is an evolutionary aspect to technology, how we work, how we do business, how we socialize. And there's also a whole new series of passwords that we need to manage. And oftentimes, Max, as we were having a conversation earlier, you were mentioning that 70 or 80% of the issues or that happen are often human related. And so with that, I want to just get us started on a conversation and get your perspectives. Carmen, you work with human beings all the time, keeping companies in compliance, and curious to see how technologies, how employers, how managers, how team members what kind of policies are being created or need to be created or we need to be thinking of.
Yeah, it's been an interesting evolution. 73%, I think, of intrusions are based on something that a person does. So companies invest in firewalls and security teams and all of these things, and it's still the humans that manage to click on the bad link or open the bad attachment. And so training those employees on a continual, and contractors on a continual basis is a key part of keeping secure.
Carmen, how are you seeing employers address this conversation? Are you seeing employers, human administrators, human resource managers within companies bringing this to the forefront? Is password something that employers are having conversations about with their employees? How are employee handbooks being updated, or what are you seeing from the human resource side?
So what I'm seeing right now is that the policies and the handbooks are definitely something that are now being reviewed. In the past, there are so many generic policies that could just be inserted into someone's handbook, but more recent, particularly in the last 3 years, and more so this year, because we've been seeing a lot of phishing that's been going around. And so as a result of that, handbooks are being updated. Social media policies are being updated. What kind of access do employees have on the business computers? In the past, many employers allowed their employees to access their personal email through the business computer. Now I'm seeing a lot of restrictions on that. And so that's definitely something that is being impacted. The other thing that I'm seeing is that managers are being trained on how to handle certain situations that come across, or being able to recognize issues that maybe haven't come up in the past. So there are some trainings where IT is providing to the internal teams so that they can be more aware of what to be on the lookout for.
Thank you. And Max, like, you're in technology, right? And technology is moving and the workforce is usually catching up. What do you see in terms of technology department, IT managers? How do you see them working with the human resource department or the human resource team to be able to connect the two conversations? Because as an end user, oftentimes we're, irritated that the policy of how to manage passwords just all of a sudden changed.
Yeah, there's been an evolution. So when the chief information security officers and those folks that are responsible for security first started to get their foothold, they were doing so in sort of this white tower thing and not communicating so well with the HR departments and the rest of the organization. And we see that changing now, where there's more of a conversation. There's a lot of discussion about passwords themselves in terms of the complexity that's required and how often they're required to be changed. Because as the security officers were pushing for more complex passwords and faster change, it resulted in behaviors that they didn't want, which is people writing things down and putting them under keyboards and things like that. And so we see this evolution, and they're trying to find some sort of a middle ground that you can keep the company secure and not place an undue burden on the employee. And part of that conversation, some organizations are shifting to providing password managers, software to their employees to help manage these different passwords that everyone has to keep. So it's been an interesting evolution.
I know passwords is an area that I grapple with myself. There's the passwords at work, there's a personal passwords at home or for my personal life. And I don't know the statistics, but I imagine we're all managing anywhere from 50 to 25 to 30 different passwords at any given time, depending on the industry, line of work, and different platforms or software that you may use personally and you may use at home. What are some of the tips, or what are some of you mentioned using a password management software, like how reliable or effective are those softwares? And if you're looking at a company or that's looking to implement, like, what's the best approach to be able to bring the team on board? And Carmen, maybe you could also share in from the human resource side, because it's a dance between technology and human beings and the management, the integration of all of that.
Yeah, there's several commercial packages out there. LastPass, 1Password happens to be my favorite, the one I recommend to my clients. And they do things like create really complex passwords that are unique to each website that you go to. Because one of the worst things you can do from a personal security standpoint is reuse the same password over and over again. And Carlos, as you mentioned, if you're having to enter 30, 40, 50 passwords in a week for various websites, your tendency as a human being is to make them all the same, right? Or on this website, I'm going to add a pound sign or something like that, right? That's your secret. And to make it easier to manage. And so a password manager really takes over that part, right? So it creates these complex passwords and it makes them unique. You make them unique for each website. And the reason that you do that is because of breaches, right? And so no company has been immune to these breaches where these, all your personal information, your passwords, birthdays, and all that stuff is revealed. And so it limits your exposure. So if you say, okay, well, website A got hacked and they released all these passwords, you change your password for that website and you're done. You don't have to go and change it for your bank and for your other other sites that you use.
Yes, I mean, I had a personal experience yesterday when I needed to update one of my passwords, and well, first I couldn't remember the password to get into the site, and then it gave me several options, and I was really impressed. One of the options was an automated password specifically for that site, and it was about a 20 character password, and it made me think twice, on a personal level, like, how do I make that decision? Do I choose my own password because that was an option, or do I choose that pre-selected? And when I choose the pre-selected password, does that mean that the computer will save this, right? Or, the site will save that password. And every time I want to go into that site, I just click on it. But what if I lose my laptop? What if I misplace it? What if I leave it someplace? And, maybe it's not the route that I want to go. It's still for that particular time. And so happy to be having this conversation today, because I think that's what a lot of my clients are asking about too, right? Employers are also wondering, especially the smaller ones who perhaps don't have all of the resources, to really hire an IT team or, a company who can really support them thoroughly. So they're trying to do it internally. And I think that's, why this conversation is critical, to help those individuals, to those companies, try to determine what is the best way for them to look at it. Some of my clients are doing what Max had mentioned in the beginning, where their IT department is issuing the passwords and saying, this is the password. And then every 3 months or so, they have a change up of passwords. Okay, here's a new list of your passwords. Those passwords are no longer available. If the employees are allowed to then create their own password, then the requirement is for the employee to submit that password and not have any changes. Or if a change is required, then they must submit that change immediately so that the IT can keep track of it. But I feel like it's very, it's a process that is not like high tech. And so I find that to be a concern, especially because we've come across a lot of situations where their systems or their emails have been, I don't know if the word is hacked. I don't think it's, correct me, Max, on the right wording on that, but, where their emails are just being hacked, right? And employees are not even sure who they're receiving certain emails from anymore.
Yeah, it can be a real problem, as you've seen from personal experience. Carlos, let me put something up on the screen. I just want to show an example of what the password manager did for my Discord password. So can you all see the Discord logo with my username and password?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's an example of a password that it would create, and you can't remember that, or maybe you can remember that, but you can't remember 40 of them that are like that. And you say, well, I don't want to type all that stuff in when I go to the website. Well, you should be able to see this screen now, which on the left-hand side, you see in the email prompt over on the right-hand side, there's a white circle with an I in the middle of it. And so that is integrated in with my browser. So when I go to that Canvas website, it says, hey, this looks like you want to log on to Canvas. So I click on that box, and then what you see on the right is what happens when I click that box. So I didn't have to type anything. It put in my username and it put in the password. All I have to do is touch the login box, right? And so that's a side of the password management thing that I think people don't talk about often enough. Yes, they're creating complex passwords. Yes, they're different for each website, but it's also integrated in with your browser and your phone. And so you're not having to type these things over and over again. And then when it's time to change the password, the software walks you through how to change the password on the website. And that can alleviate a lot of these issues. And I know people push back a little bit and they say, I don't want another subscription. Believe me, I get it. I have too many subscriptions. But this is one that can really protect your assets and is well worth it.
And I could see from an efficiency and effectiveness level, it's, I could see the value on it. I mean, how managing passwords has been managing 10, 15, 20 passwords and creating the complexity to be able to keep them secure and not have it be some sort of generic or multi-use password system. It definitely takes effort and energy. And I think software, that's an area where software is a lot more effective than we are. Carmen, you mentioned something inside of, computers, your laptop, right? And I could see another conversation unfolding from there, because now, as many of us have gone to work from home, now there's actually equipment sitting in the home, whether phone systems or computers. What happens if the equipment, disappears and gets stolen? And I could see that's going to be a different conversation that we could dive into at a later time inside of how to manage that part of it. But you got my brain thinking inside of, well, there's other exposures to it. You touched on something, Carmen, inside of, phishing scams and social engineering. And I've seen these come forth, and, it used to be, I'm the prince of some foreign country, lend me X amount of dollars and I'll repay you with several $1 million. And it was emails where they were trying to get you to respond or reply and convince you into sending them money. Now, what I see is, emails coming in, and they look like they're actually company emails. They'll use the logo, they'll use the names, they'll use, it's very sophisticated. And when we were creating this conversation, Max, we were talking about social media and the amount of data that we make available or that we disclose that essentially could, make us more susceptible or easier targets for this kind of areas. And so passwords is definitely one key part of it. And then there's the part where you get baited and click in that email, and all of a sudden you just gave access to your computer system or network. I think we lost your volume. Max, you're on the muted side.
Oh yeah, he's on mute.
Yeah, I had another coughing fit. Sorry. Yeah, I advise my clients whenever they get an email like that said, Bank of America, we need you to verify your income or something like that. Never, ever, ever click on that. If you have a concern, go to the Bank of America site by yourself on your own and log in and see if there's a message waiting for you. Because, you mentioned, Carlos, the sophistication is really gotten up there. So all the misspellings, the crooked logos, the wrong color in the logo, all that stuff is gone now, right? These people are professionals and they know what they're doing. So you have to be really careful.
On your side, Carmen, are employers talking to their employees about social engineering, about scams via email? What kind of protocols, or how are you seeing employers manage this level of conversations? Because it's getting more and more pervasive from what I could see, and more sophisticated, as Max was sharing.
Yes, that's true. It really is. It's so sophisticated. It's incredible because, from my experience with a couple of organizations, and these are extremely prestigious organizations who, have everything at their disposal, like they just have technology available. And what happened, particularly with one of them, they received an email, and the CFO received an email from the CEO to transfer a very large amount of money. And when we looked at the email later, it looked like an official email with all of the information of the CEO, and the CFO followed through. Luckily, we were able to retrieve the funds eventually. However, in the meantime, what it caused us to really look at is, what are some of the things that we need to start looking? What do we need to be communicating to the team so that they can start taking a look at these type of emails? So some of the protocols that have been put in place is to, when you do receive a request, particularly for a request of transfer of funds, or a request for change of direct deposit, for a payroll, is that you click on the actual email so you can see exactly who it's coming from. Many times what I've seen is that the email, it does have the name of the person, but it will have a different link or a different, email or domain. And so you realize like, okay, this is not from my CEO. This is not from my finance department. So those are some of the things that we want to look at. The other thing that we are implementing is when you do get such a request, is make a phone call. Hey, I just got your email to make this change or to make this transfer. Just want to verify it with you over the phone. Is that correct? Was that your request? And so that second step would have actually helped the two organizations that actually had, this phishing scam going on. And while, again, they both were able to retrieve the funds, it just took a lot of time. And, it also ends up in really, really difficult conversations within the team members, because you expect and you think like, hey, you know what, if I do have to make a transfer of funds, and it's that kind of a large amount, like, is an email really all you need to receive to make that transfer? So it questions internal protocols and procedures as well. So a lot to take into consideration.
It is. And I, in the early stages, I remember, junk folders picking up, or spyware or software that you would use would pick up a lot of these different scenarios. But as it gets more sophisticated, it's like almost like a cat and mouse game, right? As the software evolves to protect us from it, there's another way that it gets created to bypass that. The most one of the ones that grabbed my attention, because normally when I see something like that, I click on the email and seeing who it's being sent from, and it's usually some weird domain name or email address. We had a situation with one of our clients where something similar happened to what you advised, and they had actually gone as far as registering a domain name that looked very similar to it and just changed the letter on it. So if you clicked on it and you saw it, it actually looked like a legitimate email with its domain name, but one of the letters had been skewed to be able to get that domain name. So it's definitely sophisticated in the level of detail that they're willing to go through when they're targeting a particular company. And one of the things that in our earlier conversations as we were preparing for this call or this conversation, Max, was, we're investing into top technology, and it's sort of like you want to share about it, you want to talk about it, you want to let your clients, or you want to let your, whoever you're doing business with know, like, oh, these are the softwares or the platforms that we use, because it adds more credibility, or it lets, the world know that you're operating at whatever softwares you're using. And one of the things that grabbed my attention is that what you shared inside of, we're often disclosing and just creating a roadmap through social media or through LinkedIn or through, wherever we're sharing, and sort of creating a roadmap for somebody to know everything that's the whole path there. And if you could share in that inside of, how social media is not just, it's a great tool for connecting and networking and socializing, but it also opens up another door.
Yeah, on the personal side, people still have a tendency to overshare, and so provide their birth date on Facebook and make it available. They don't close their profile and do things like that. And that allows bad actors to be able to gather more information, or what they call OSINT, or open source intelligence, to do something against the target. Now, that's not going to be your Joe Schmo or whatever, but if it's, you know, the president of a company or the controller of a company, then that is a legitimate target to go after. And I just want to put something up on the screen again, real short. This is a program called CUP. So it's a common use passwords profiler. This took me 11 seconds to download from the internet. It prompted me for the name of the subject, the partner's name, the child's name, and then it has at the bottom there, you can see a field where I can just put in words. So if I've got this target and he's got pictures of him, you know, playing baseball or AYSO, whatever those words are, I put all those words in. And right after I hit the enter button, after that word jet skis on the bottom, I couldn't even count 1001, right? 61,845 words came back. Right, that's in a password file that I can now brute force against a subject. The same is true with LinkedIn, as you mentioned, right? So if I say that in a job posting that I'm running these versions of Oracle database, we use the Amazon cloud, what you're doing is you're advertising to bad actors. These are all the things that I have. So if you want to do some research on me and how to attack me or come at me, here's all the information that you need. So we've got to find a fine line between, you know, that forward face that you project that says that you're out there and you're not, back in the olden days with your technology, and giving them a roadmap for basically how to attack you. So you have to do it on the personal side, and you need to do it on the professional side as well.
Which brings me to a question for you, Carmen, from a human resource standpoint. You know, in the workplace, an employer can create rules, can create policies and practices. And what Max is pointing to is also the personal side, right? What practices are they doing on their own individual side? And where does that line blur? Because now we're looking at an employer maybe speaking or making requests on the person's personal side. What are you seeing inside of employees navigating? Are they having these conversations? That's what I always come back to, is like, sometimes it feels like we're the boiling frog and the water keeps getting hotter, but we're not realizing it. That's how this area of social media and technology has at moments occurred to me. And I'm curious of how employers are approaching this. Are they proactively having conversations, coaching, or creating practices? And how does that employer-employee personal life get managed when you're dealing with this kind of scenarios? You're muted, Carmen.
Yeah. The conversations are definitely happening. What I'm not seeing yet is I'm not seeing a lot of implementation and a lot of policy development around it. But the conversations are happening because a lot of employers also, ask employees to actually post on their social media, post about a particular event that might be happening. And so then you begin to cross the line, how do you keep the company safe and how do you keep your personal information safe? Because now when you start tagging, right, your employer on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, now whoever follows that company, they're also going to start looking at who are you and what do you have going on. And so I think that it's a critical conversation. I think it's a conversation that we need to be having a lot more of, but not just the conversation, but now start getting into what policies need to be implemented. I do have several clients who have provided that information or allowed their employees to post, on their personal pages, and they ask them to post on their personal pages. And now employees are starting to say like, hey, can I say no? do I have to post this? And so, yes, you can definitely say no. I'm recommending to my clients is like, look, if you want your employees to post on your behalf, we have to create an email so that they can actually create a what is it? Oh my gosh, they're a new login, into social media. Sure, they can use their name, but it has to be specific to their business, because employees are just not that open to sharing the business information on their personal pages the way they were before. Before, it was so common. I'm seeing a lot of hesitation from employees now.
And when an employer asks an employee to share on social media, does that begin to blur the lines of when they're working and not working? Because social media is sort of 24/7. It's on your phone.
Right. Yeah. And it can, right? I mean, that's why there are some social media policies as well. So, and you always say, work related, if it's work related, but then yes, when do you determine, oh, it was work related? Yes, I'm checking Facebook. Oh, is that work related? Yes, it's work related. I mean, I think it's going to be very tough to keep employees from accessing social media, particularly if, people are working 8 hours a day. It's very easy, especially because you have automatic logins. You open up your computer and everything pops up. So I think it's very difficult to keep employees off of social media during work hours, but that's another topic as well, right?
It definitely is, and it's just a reminder of how pervasive technology has been in all of our lives, or it has. I mean, it touches every aspect of our life, from banking to working to socializing. And you mentioned you're seeing employers have the conversations, but they're not quick to acting on it. Why do you sense that is? Is there a lack of urgency on their part, or is the mindset it's not going to happen to us, or where? And I often look at it from, we've been in the cyber liability conversations for quite a number of years inside of the insurance world. And when we started talking about cyber liability to our clients, there wasn't an urgency behind it. It's happening to the Fortune 500. It's happening to the big corporations. We're seeing a shift in that. We're seeing now, one is, our clients who they're contracting with are making cyber liability insurance part of the contracting process. So we're seeing a demand coming from there. And we're seeing employers becoming more aware of it as well. And I'm always curious of what's the hesitation between the awareness, the understanding, having the conversations, to actually implementation.
I think
Just
it's a
before-
combination. Oh, and let me just, I'll answer briefly, and then Max, please hop right in. But I think, your question for me was, what am I seeing from the employers, and what's the hesitation for them? I think the hesitation for them is a combination of a couple of things. One of them is just not enough. They're not knowledgeable enough, on what to do, what questions to ask, where to look into it, resources. And then the other one, I believe, is just the priorities. What is a priority? And unfortunately, this is not on the top 5.
Thank you.
I was just going to mention, Carlos, that if you're a bad actor, do you want to go up against a Fortune 100 company that has all the best tools, an entire division related to cybersecurity, where you may get in and may be able to create a little havoc? Or do you want to go after that small to medium sized mom and pop business in the $50 million range that doesn't have an IT department, that doesn't have a cybersecurity department, can't afford the software, right? I mean, so there's been a real shift in that space towards those smaller to medium sized businesses.
What do you recommend, Max, from speaking to entrepreneurs or managers? It could be overwhelming, right? The entrepreneur, and one of the things you said, Carmen, is not in the top 5. And it will become the top 5 when something happens, but then you're reacting, and then now you're in survival mode and all of that. What would you recommend, Max, or like how does an employer, how does a company leader, manager, administrator move these conversations to the top 5?
I think it's tough, that with inflation and wages rising and supply chain problems and everything else, I can completely understand how it doesn't make the top 5. I think there are several resources. CISA.gov, CISA.gov is a good resource, and that points to some other resources on the National Institute for Standards, the NIST site, and those have several white papers and resources and things aimed at small to medium-sized businesses to help them understand both what the threats are and what the mitigations are. And then I think that would put company leadership in a position to be able to talk with their IT suppliers to say, hey, what about this? How are we covered for this? What can we do to try to address these concerns? So as a small business owner, small and medium-sized business, that is definitely where I would start.
Got it. And leadership, having an understanding and knowing that moving it to a top 5 priority, then there's the team member buy-in, getting the rest of the team to come on board. And when we look at phishing scams or passwords, it basically goes across the organization. So if you're a company, 5 to 150 employees, and you know that level of complexity, the level of teams, the level of number of people that you're working with, how do employers, how does leadership approach the best approach in that you're seeing or that you recommend, Carmen, to get the buy-in from the employees to have the awareness and the understanding of the implications behind the technology that we're working with?
I mean, I think one of the ways is, to be able to share with them that, look, it could personally impact you. And so when we are personally impacted, we tend to take, a little bit more of an interest in following through. So, perfect example is with one of my clients. I mean, I, as their outsourced HR company, I receive emails that are coming through from employees, and it says things like, please change my direct deposit information to this bank account. I have a new bank account. And so I know that that's not sufficient information for me to make that change. I'm going to ask the employee, here's this form, complete this form, or go into the system, add your request on there, and we'll be able to make the change that way. Or you can make the change directly on your own by logging into, the payroll system that they're using. So, but when we actually educate them on the implications that it could have, both on a personal and on a business level, that's going to be the most important thing here, is educating your team members on what can happen, what's happening out there, giving them examples of some of the things that have already occurred and how people have lost millions and millions of dollars as a result of it. In smaller organizations like the ones that I'm dealing with, I mean, potentially a loss of $180,000. That's a lot of money for, for a company or for a nonprofit. So letting them know how their companies can be impacted by educating them, and then not just educating, but then following up with the tools and the resources that they need to be able to look out for those type of things. Having a check-in, again, with, I mentioned, making that phone call and calling, if you do want to make a change to your account, call your HR department directly, call your payroll department directly, follow it up with an email. Have, 2 or 3 different things or steps that you take before someone can actually make a change. I think that's another great thing to do, especially if you don't have all the other, fancy tools and resources to protect the company.
Yeah, I think you hit a very key point of connecting the risk or the exposure to how it would impact the team member themselves and the organization as a whole. we see it in claims, in workers' comp claims, or it raises the cost of doing business. And anything that raises the cost of doing business, puts strains on the company, and that ultimately trickles down to the workforce. Over the last several years, we've been investing more time and energy into purposeful leadership, purposeful organization. And one of the keys that we've been expanding into is really connecting the roles that each team member plays with the success of the organization, with the success of each team member as well. And it's an area that it's become more clear. It's a team sport. Running an organization today, it's really a team sport, from the leadership to the management to the team members, because each area can present a weak link or an exposure to a company. We're at the last few minutes of our conversation, so I'd like to hear your last thoughts that you want to leave us with, and also where can listeners, clients contact you or reach you or find you at?
So I would say, my last words that I would like to share is take a look at your handbook. Take a look at your policies. How outdated are your policies? While your handbook have been updated, this year, or it's about to be updated for the year 2023, with all the policies that are going into effect. However, the one policy or several policies that do not get changed are your social media and email access, all the electronic device access. Those policies just tend to roll into the next year. So make it a point to actually review your policies this year, talk to a specialist who can support you with that, and make the necessary changes to protect your business and your employees. And I can be found on Facebook and on LinkedIn, Carmen Torres, and also under my HR specialist. Thank you,
Carmen.
So my top three would be buy yourself an inexpensive USB drive and make your own copies of your data, even if you are connected to Dropbox or Box or one of those other services. The second thing I would say is stop sharing so much on social media. Don't answer those questions about what your favorite band in high school was or what your first car was. That's all information that bad actors use. And then the first, my most important recommendation would be get a password manager and use it. Get those passwords off of those Post-it notes, those Excel spreadsheets, the PDF documents, whatever you think you're doing to keep yourself safe, and get them in a password manager. The best way to reach out to me is either through LinkedIn, Max Kimble, or on Twitter at Kimble LLC.
Thank you, Max. And what I'm walking away with, from what you're both sharing is be proactive, get informed, and from Carmen, make this, a top priority, and moving from having the conversations to actually taking some action steps and get that ball rolling. I always think the future looks bright, right? If that's just my perception, I think human potentials, our evolution and how we've evolved, that's how we arrived here, and it continues to evolve. And at the same time, as being in the know and being in the now allows us to make informed decisions in terms of how to move forward successfully and profitably. And there's more conversations to be had. I feel like we just touched the tip of the iceberg. There's, Max, you were touching on backups. How do we back up our data? Where does that data get stored? And all of that is the new reality or conversations that we're in, be it on a personal level or be it on a business level. So I'd like to thank you both for joining us here today, and I'm looking forward to having another conversation to continue to expand on this topic just as technology evolves, we ourselves got to evolve in how we think, how we act, and how we stay in the know. So thank you both for being here today and joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.